Computers don't have emotions. Computers don't have intuition. Computers trade off of one variable and one variable only. Humans use their intuitions. We can look, we can see, we can feel and touch. Looking at this headline right now, we knew pretty quickly that it was not a true headline.
April 23rd, 2013. Despite the Boston Marathon bombing from a week before, the stock market seemed to be doing half decent. Early that afternoon, the Dow was up by almost 13 points, roughly 0.1% on the day. The blue chip index was up by around 0.9%, which was alright progress for a random Tuesday. At 1:07 p.m. though, a single tweet, consisting of 12 words and a single colon, sent this relatively mundane day into a tailspin. The tweet, which was sent out by the Associated Press, read in total, quote, "Breaking, 2 explosions in the White House and Barack Obama is injured." The tweet was short, simple, and straight to the point. Of course, it was also completely and utterly false. Despite the tweet only being up for a few minutes, the damage was done. It was seen by many of the AP's 1.9+ million followers, and it was retweeted over 1,500 times. Within 20 minutes, the Associated Press would learn what had happened, and they would give an official response from a related account at 1:25 p.m. Quote, "The @AP Twitter account has been suspended after it was hacked. The tweet about an attack on the White House was false." Within those 18 minutes, this incident, which would later be known as the hack crash, showed the world just how extremely volatile the stock market had become, and how a single tweet could potentially cripple the world economy. Two and a half weeks before this incident would take place, Bloomberg LP announced that it would begin adding a small number of Twitter accounts to its financial information terminals. You see, many of those that do trade in stocks for a living use those Bloomberg terminals to conduct their day-to-day operations. Those terminals are what you think of when you think of stock market trading. The stereotypical black computer screen, which shows fancy graphs and acronyms that make no sense outside of those trained to use them. So, these terminals had added a small number of Twitter accounts to its system, funnily enough, in an effort to combat misinformation. This was spawned from a number of small incidents, but one in particular from August of 2012. That month, a fake Twitter account had been created for the Russian office of the Interior of the Minister. Within days, it had accumulated thousands of followers, and then sent out a damaging tweet on August 6th, 2012. Claiming that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad had been killed. Believe it or not, this actually caused the price of West Texas Intermediate, often abbreviated as WTI, and known in the stock trading community as a benchmark for crude oil pricing, to soar from $1 to just shy of $92. When the tweet from this fake Russian account was known to be a hoax, the damage had been done. The market had shown itself extremely volatile, and willing to be taken advantage of from a single unverified Twitter account. So, this step, incorporating some authenticated Twitter accounts into the automated trading system of Bloomberg LP, seemed to be a step in the right direction. It was supposed to drown out the noise of unverified tweets, and instead focus on the truly established journalistic entities. However, the hacking of the AP's Twitter account in April of 2013, just weeks after this change was implemented, showed how every step forward was just another 2 steps back. The April 23rd tweet, sent out at roughly 1:07 p.m., had an immediate effect on the stock market. Between 1:08 and 1:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged more than 100 points. It went from roughly 14,697.15 to 14,548.58 in a matter of 2 minutes. the S&P 500 declined nearly a full percentage point, which admittedly doesn't sound like a lot, but is enough to wipe out $136 billion in stock value. That's right, billion, with a B. That's the equivalent of 92.2 billion euro, and it was enough to drop the value of the dollar and the yen to 98.60, temporarily devaluing all United States currency, before recovering to a level above 99 just minutes later. Those minutes, as described by one trader on the floor of the stock market, were, quote, pure chaos. It's not hard to see why. In 2013, we were just a handful of years removed from the Great Recession of 2008, and it brought to mind the flash crash of 2010. That was when a mysterious crash occurred on May 6th of that year, plunging Wall Street into a $1 trillion crash over the span of 36 minutes for an ultimately unknown reason. Many were worried that this crash, inspired by a random tweet, could mirror that 2010 incident, which dropped the stock market nearly 1,000 points within half an hour. It also brought to mind a 2012 incident the year before, known as the Knight Capital crisis. That was when an investment company, known as Knight Capital, lost hundreds of millions of dollars because of a computer glitch. I'm not joking. A simple issue with Knight Capital's trading system lost the company $440 million, ultimately sending them on the path towards bankruptcy and towards an eventual buyout. Many were worried that this tweet could lead to a crash that made all of the prior incidents look like chump change. And, coming off the heels of the Boston Marathon bombing, the idea of there being a terrorist attack in the White House did not seem that outlandish of an idea for the tense culture on Wall Street. It's easy to see why those few minutes would be described as pure chaos, as the people who trade with millions and billions of dollars had to wonder whether the wheels were coming off of the ride known as America. At around 1:15 p.m., as speculation was spreading around the nation, the daily White House press briefing was getting started.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. I have no announcements, so I will take your questions. Julie.
Thanks, Jay. I just want to say at the top that it appears as though AP's Twitter account has been hacked, so anything that was just sent out about any incident at the White House is obviously false, and we'll be putting something out hopefully shortly to clarify that if that hasn't happened already.
Good. I thank you for that. I appreciate that, and I can say that the president is fine. I was just with him.
Thank you. On another topic, Israel...
That was Julie Pace, the chief White House correspondent for the Associated Press, starting off the briefing with a small statement about the hacking incident. Jaak Horn responded in a slightly humorous way, before moving on to field another question from Julie about the White House's response to the Syrian government using chemical weapons. By the time the press briefing started, the market had actually fully recovered. In fact, by 1:13 p.m. Eastern Time, just 6 minutes after the original tweet, the Dow Jones was back above 14,690, and all seemed to be business as usual. However, that did not stop the concern being expressed by those on Wall Street. If something like this could drive the market into a $136 billion plunge, what would a real incident look like? Art Hogan, of Lizard Capital Markets, stated about this, quote, "It was really scary and really fast. It corrected fast. By the time you realized it happened, it already corrected. We're in an environment where we're sensitive to any news that sounds like terrorism. That makes it that much more believable. That's the tricky part. When something like the AP gets hacked, it becomes reality for a period of time, until it's not." Jack Reed, a Democratic senator from Rhode Island who sits on the banking committee, stated about this incident, quote, "It is disturbing that the markets were so easily manipulated by false information. Congress and regulators, particularly the SEC, should closely examine this case and social media policies to try to prevent this thing from recurring." Sal Arnook, the co-head of New Jersey-based Themis Trading and the co-author of a book named Broken Markets, stated, quote, "My initial reaction before I realized it was a fake tweet was the same horrible feeling I had when I worked at the top of the New York Stock Exchange, when planes hit the World Trade Center. When I realized it was a fake tweet, I was outraged and ashamed that the market was able to be manipulated so easily. Russ Serto, the managing director in fixed income at Brienne Capital in New York, stated, quote, "It's a new low in the capital market sales and trading and investor community." Sean McLaughlin, a stock trader, posted on Twitter later that day, quote, "Traders are so scared. The littlest things set them off to sell everything." To close off this round of initial reactions, I'll share with you a quote from Jerry Hancock, a professor of communication and computer and info sciences at Cornell University, who stated, quote, "Our trust of social media has reached new levels. It's amazing that things like social media have gone from something the kids do to affecting how the market operates. This response also highlights that humans have a built-in truth bias to believe what others say. Although there is a lot of suspicion about the internet in general, the truth bias is alive and well with social media." By later that afternoon, the stock market had normalized again, and everything seemed to be back on track. A couple of hours later, the satirical news site The Onion would tweet out the exact same tweet sent out by the Associated Press, which earned some groans and muted chuckles from the media. However, learning how this incident had occurred, and how to ensure that it would not happen again, were the lingering questions at the back of everyone's mind. A Time Business article, written by Christopher Matthews and published the next day, on April 24th, explored how this incident had happened. It explained that this was onset by high-frequency trading and the computer systems used by these traders. If you're unfamiliar with this, as I was just a week or so ago, high-frequency trading is when companies or stockbrokers employ computerized systems to make hundreds, thousands, or even millions of very small trades each day. At face value, each of these trades are not profitable, but the goal is to make an excess of these trades to create a larger value. Think either The Wolf of Wall Street or Office Space, but without the illegal stuff. The goal of high-frequency traders is to collect enough small profits that they create large profits. So instead of selling one stock for $1,000, you sell 1,000 stocks for $1, as a simple metaphor. To employ this method, many of these traders use computerized systems to create these transactions. The Bloomberg terminal I told you about a few minutes ago is the primary method. These traders use that system to buy or sell stock, depending on how the market fluctuates, and even according to the news of the day. As the article from Christopher Matthews describes, quote, "High-frequency traders compile a list of news sources like SEC filings, business publications, and yes, Twitter, and tell their computer programs to comb through these sources looking for specific words like bankruptcy or merger that signal something about the broader market or specific companies." So, with this in mind, it's easy to see why words like Obama and explosion and breaking would cause a dramatic drop-off in the stock market, as computer algorithms take these words into account and try to divest or invest in certain stocks. Jerry Kachoyan, a day trader, tweeted about this very thing. Quote, "It's not the fact that @AP was just hacked. It's the fact that we have HFT algos reading headlines, reacting to them." HFT refers to high-frequency traders, and algos means algorithms, for those that didn't catch that. Sal Arnuk, who I quoted just a few minutes ago, shared a few thoughts of his own about this phenomenon. Quote, "There's a substantial business by high-frequency trading hedge funds, reading machine-readable news sold to them for big bucks by brand-name news organizations. The market truly wonders about regulators' ability to keep up with the very fast and speeding markets over the past few years." Larry Tabb, the chief executive of his own financial research and consulting firm, named Tabb Group, talked about this as well. Quote, "Firms are looking for information wherever they could find it. They're analyzing real-time news feeds, scanning the web, and mining Twitter feeds. They price news." Joseph Saluzzi, the co-head of Themis Trading, shared his own thoughts. Quote, "You have to wonder about this system we've built based on technology and speed. The SEC's mission is to protect the individual investor, and they don't feel protected today. Events like today shatter confidence, and the problem is you don't get confidence back tomorrow. And it wasn't just the stock market, it was the bond market and commodity market and everything. The event was done before humans could even process it." Kevin Polcari of O'Neill Securities stated on the CNBC program Power Lunch, quote, "That goes to show you how algorithms read headlines and create these automatic orders. You don't even have time to react as a human being. I'd imagine the SEC is going to look into how this happens. It's not about banning computers, but it's about protection and securing our markets." This was becoming a common thread in almost all of the criticisms of this event. It wasn't just that the stock market had dipped due to the breaking news. It is that it was false news, perpetrated by an unknown hacker, which affected the market in a horrific way before humans could even react. This is why, as the selling and buying of stocks and shares has become much more automatic and based on computer algorithms, many old-school stockbrokers have resisted change. They truly dislike how computer programs control the fate of not only the US economy, but the world's economy at large. They claim that this was an event that would not have happened if humans had first read the AP tweet before making any changes. The hack of the Associated Press Twitter account was just a continuation of similar attacks over the preceding days, weeks, and months. On February 18th of 2013, the Twitter account for fast food restaurant chain Burger King was hacked. It began to change all of its photos and logos to that of its main competitor, McDonald's, and even tweeted out, quote, "Just got sold to McDonald's because the Whopper flopped. Freedom is failure." It is worth noting that in this tweet, the word freedom is misspelled. A day later, the Twitter account of the vehicle brand Jeep was similarly hacked, and began tweeting out similar nonsense. Claims that Jeep had been sold to Cadillac, claims that the CEO was a user of crack cocaine, and much more. Both of these hacks seemed to be from the same attackers, as they shared common themes and the same type of juvenile humor. As if that wasn't enough, in March of 2013, multiple Twitter accounts belonging to the BBC were hacked in a similar fashion. These accounts, including their Arabic and weather handles, began tweeting out random propaganda, which seemed to be in support of Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. This eventually culminated in a tweet from the BBC Weather Twitter account, which stated plainly, quote, "Syrian electronic army was here." It seems like this little-known hacker collective, known as the Syrian Electronic Army, was behind this hack, as well as the prior attacks on Jeep and Burger King. On the weekend before the incident later known as the hack crash, the Twitter accounts of both 60 Minutes and 48 Hours were hacked. Both tweeted out the same insane comment, which read, quote, "Exclusive. Terror is striking the hashtag USA, and hashtag Obama is shamelessly in bed with Al-Qaeda." These tweets came just days after the Boston Marathon bombing, when tensions throughout America were pretty high. It seemed to mirror comments made by infamous right-wing internet host Alex Jones. When the AP hack took place, just a few days later on April 23rd, many assumed that it had been done by the same hacker collective, this self-titled Syrian Electronic Army. Despite posting juvenile comments, which can be summed up as simple pranks, the effect that they seemed to be having on the economy was absolutely real. There was palpable fear that these Twitter hackings were just the beginning of a long, and potentially bloody, cyber war between these hackers and the rest of the world, especially since the conflict in Syria was just beginning to seriously ramp up during this time period. Andy Carvin of NPR tweeted out a question, which I think poses significance in this day and age. Quote, "When do vandals graduate to cyber terrorist?" This question had actually been half answered by a NATO study from the month before, March of 2013. This study, which was titled The Tallinn Manual on the International Law Applicable to Cyber Warfare, was not an official NATO ruling. However, it did include a collection of opinions from experts who weighed in with their thoughts. Almost unanimously, this study decided that if a state could prove a cyber attack had led to death or severe property damage, it was acceptable for that state to retaliate with traditional weaponry. This study ruled that if a hacker collective managed to pose significant risk to the economy, whether it be via tweet or social media hack or whatever, that the countries within the North Atlantic Alliance would be well within their rights to seek justice or punishment with any weapons at their disposal. So, with that in mind, it was time for the proper officials to determine who was truly responsible for this hack, and whether or not they would meet the threshold for such a retaliation.
I'm told that the SEC has done a preliminary analysis here, and it does not suggest that market makers left the markets as they did in the May 6th event, the so-called flash crash. So that might be a little bit of an encouraging sign here, but they are still gathering string over at the SEC. We know that the FBI is investigating as well, and the Secret Service monitoring this situation. We also know there's going to be a hearing on cybersecurity up on Capitol Hill later in the afternoon. We expect some questions to be raised by members of Congress about this event there, but broader questions also on cybersecurity and the protection of the nation's infrastructure here. So this event putting a lot of focus on cybersecurity and how it can move things in markets and in physical space, Sue.
The Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as the SEC, made no initial comment on the hack, but they would make an official statement later that evening. They stated that they were investigating the hack, not only who perpetrated it, but how they could help prevent a similar incident from happening. Daniel Gallagher, the commissioner of the SEC, stated, quote, "I can't tell you exactly what the facts are at this point or what we are looking for, but for sure we want to understand major swings like that, however short it was." Within minutes of the initial tweet, the Secret Service began investigating what seemed to be a threat on the president. Within the hour, FBI spokeswoman Jenny Shearer confirmed that the Bureau was investigating the incident. However, the root of the hack was pretty easy to identify. On the afternoon of the hack, Mike Baker, a journalist for the Associated Press, tweeted out, quote, "The @AP hack came less than an hour after some of us received an impressively disguised phishing email." The phishing email, sent out to AP staffers, looked legitimate. It seemed to be sent by supervisors of the AP, and it urged all of the people reading to click on a link directing them to a blog at either Reuters or the Washington Post. In fact, the phishing email had been reported and dealt with about an hour before the tweet was made. At 12:29 p.m., the tech staff at the Associated Press had sent an email out to everyone hit with the phishing attempt, and made them aware not to click on the blog post linked within the email. The AP alleged that hackers made repeated attempts to steal passwords of AP journalists, noting that not only was its official Twitter account seized by these hackers, but so was their AP mobile account. Within minutes of the 1:07 p.m. tweet, claiming that a bomb had exploded at the White House and injured President Obama, the AP had tweeted out from their other untouched accounts. They stated that their affected accounts had been suspended, quote, "until we can be assured of their security," and warned followers to not respond to any news posted by these accounts. So, now that the how had been figured out, it was time for the AP and investigators to figure out the who and the why. Fortunately, they would not have to investigate very hard to figure out either. Within 1 hour of the initial hack, credit was claimed by the Syrian Electronic Army. The same hacker collective, which had claimed credit for a series of hacks against other companies in Western nations, tweeted out a screenshot which showed a user of theirs with control of the Associated Press Twitter account. With this screenshot, they also tweeted, quote, "Ops, @AP get owned by Syrian Electronic Army. #SEA, #Syria, #Bye Bye Obama." Known as the SEA, the Syrian Electronic Army is an informal collective of hackers who cause trouble on behalf of Syrian President Assad. In a way, they are almost a mirrored version of Anonymous. Instead of acting against a governmental body, they were indirectly working for one. In fact, throughout the various incarnations of the Arab Spring, these two hacker collectives were actively campaigning and warring with one another, most noticeably during the Tunisian Revolution. Over the years, they had engaged in various phishing and DDoS attacks against Western nations and social media accounts, which had now progressed into their hacking of multiple Twitter handles. A particular member of the SEA, known as the Pro, stated that the group had attacked the Associated Press because the US was, quote, "supporting the terrorist groups in Syria," and they had seized their web domains in revenge. This mysterious hacker, the Pro, then claimed that the phishing expedition had tricked more than 50 employees of the Associated Press, all of whom clicked on the link thinking that it had come from their boss. Security researchers, tracking the path that the hackers took, later confirmed that the Syrian Electronic Army was responsible. They had apparently traced their IP address to a specific Russian location, which was believed to be a proxy used by the Syrian Electronic Army in other attacks. Despite this knowledge being known pretty early on, it would be years before there were any real consequences faced by these hackers.
In today's ultra-tech world, hackers sometimes do as much damage in conflicts as ground troops do. Enter the Syrian Electronic Army, a hacking group in support of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The FBI on March 22nd unsealed charges against 3 members of the SEA, which included allegations of extortion and criminal conspiracy. One of the men, 36-year-old Peter Romar, has already been detained in Germany. The other 2, 22-year-old Ahmad Umar Aga and 27-year-old Firas Dardar, remain at large. The FBI has offered $100,000 for information leading to their arrest. Aga and Dardar, sometimes known by their aliases The Pro and The Shadow, hacked websites belonging to media outlets, Harvard University, and Microsoft. Perhaps their best-known hack happened in 2013 when they gained access to the Associated Press's Twitter account and tweeted that a bomb struck the White House, injuring the president. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Christelle Koumoui.
On March 22nd, 2016, nearly 3 years after the hack crash nearly lost $136 billion, the FBI made the announcement that they had put 3 specific hackers in their sights. As you just heard, one of the hackers, named Peter Romar, aka Pierre Romar, had already been detained. He was being extradited from Germany to the US to stand trial. The 2 other hackers were Ahmad Umar Aga, the hacker known as The Pro, who I referenced just a minute ago, and Firas Dardar, an associate of the other 2, who had nicknamed himself The Shadow. All 3 were added to the FBI's Cyber's Most Wanted list, and rewards of $100,000 were announced for information leading to their arrest. John Carlin, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, stated about these charges. Quote, while some of the activity sought to harm the economic and national security of the United States in the name of Syria, these detailed allegations reveal that the members also used extortion to try to line their own pockets at the expense of law-abiding people all over the world. These hackers were believed to be responsible for the hacking of the AP Twitter account, but they were also facing several charges of hacking, unlawful and unauthorized access to computer systems, and much more. Later that year, this happened.
According to the U.S. Department of Justice, a computer hacker sympathetic to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government has pleaded guilty. He acted as a middleman in an extortion scheme targeting U.S. media outlets and governments. 37-year-old Peter Romar was a member of the Syrian Electronic Army hacking group. He had joined an operation to infiltrate computers of Assad's perceived detractors. Romar, who was extradited from Germany in May, faces up to 5 years in prison when he is sentenced.
In September of 2016, the hacker that had been extradited to the United States to stand trial pled guilty to felony charges of conspiring to receive extortion proceeds and conspiring to unlawfully access computers. John Carlin, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, weighed in once again. Quote, today's guilty plea is by the latest international offender who believed that he could operate from abroad, behind the perceived veil of anonymity offered by the internet, and use computers to threaten the security of our citizens and their property. It shows that the Department of Justice and the FBI stand behind their pledge to hold accountable foreign actors who assist in the hacking of U.S. victims. The hack crash stands as a monument to just how intertwined social media has become with our everyday lives. Despite having no long-lasting impact on the economy, it highlighted how a momentary lapse on social media can be worth more than its weight in gold. Quite literally. One tweet from the Associated Press was worth $136 billion. As we've seen in the years since, a single tweet from an unhinged Twitter user in a position of power can be damaging in its own right. A few weeks after the hacking of the AP's Twitter account, Twitter introduced two-factor authentication in the efforts to combat anything like this happening again. So if you want to thank anyone for it being a little harder to get into your Twitter account, I guess you could thank the Syrian Electronic Army. Speaking of the SEA, they have been relatively quiet since 2015 or so. They continued their constant hacking attempts throughout 2015, but improvements in social media technology have made it much more difficult for their phishing or DDoS campaigns to have any lasting effects. In 2017, they surfaced once again when they seized control of Republican politician John Kasich's website, turning it into a pro-ISIS page for a short period of time. They have also conducted hacks of both CNN and the BBC's social media accounts, but neither of those have resulted in anything as profound as the initial AP hack in 2013. Both times, they were discovered before they could do any real damage, and their efforts since have been resisted. Many still aren't positive what the end goal for the Syrian Electronic Army has been throughout these years, other than supporting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. It has never been confirmed that they actually work for the Syrian government, but many consider them to be a de facto wing of the government, albeit an extremist wing. Many take into account Assad's own past with the Syrian Computer Society, often seen as the predecessor of the Syrian Electronic Army, and assume that the SEA works under some kind of directive. Despite hacker Peter Romar pleading guilty in September of 2016, little else has been heard of him in the year and a half since. His sentencing was supposed to take place the following month, October, but no publications picked that up for a story. His charges seem to indicate that he was facing a 5-year sentence, so I could only assume that he is still serving that sentence as we speak. The other two hackers named by the FBI for involvement in the SEA hacking attacks, known as the Pro and the Shadow, both disappeared after charges were filed against them. They have not been publicly seen in the years since, and both are still wanted for their involvement in this hoax.